It's funny, I saw Matt and Gail Denham, boom, come in today, and it's kind of weird because of this. So they were one of the first couples from the beginning, and every year we would do a series here at the door called Nuts and Bolts. And so I've got to think that it's maybe a little funny that they pop in here for the, oh, these guys are still doing this. Yeah, we're still doing this. And a lot of you have heard this for 13 years, once a year, over and over again. And all Nuts and Bolts is basically like the nuts and bolts of Christianity, the nuts and bolts of the door of this church, of why we exist, why we do what we do, why we do what we do, how we do it. And so it's kind of Christianity 101. Nuts and Bolts is there to kind of recalibrate all of us and us collectively, corporately as a church, to just see clearly again, to have our crosshairs once more centered on that which matters most. And so that's what it's all about. And what we decided to do this year is just coincidentally, we just came out of Matthew 28 where we have the Great Commission. And honestly, there's no greater text like single sentence or, two sentence statement in the entire Bible that's more nuts and bolts than the Great Commission. And so we've decided to go back and take a few weeks breaking it down into 5 parts. Last week, Chad came in with the first part, right? That all authority's been given to Christ on heaven and on earth. And so today you're going to get the second piece, which is go therefore and make disciples. So you're going to hear about that thing today, the elephant in the room, that none of us really want to talk about or be challenged with, and yet you hear it from us over and over again. You're going to hear it again today. So open up to Matthew 28. We're going to take 8 words. We're going to break down 8 words. After every service, at the end, you hear something, right? And that's outside that door is your mission field. And there's a reason why we end the service that way. We were in a church at one point when our kids were really young. They didn't say that, but the place where we were meeting had that posted over the inside of the doors when you left. So there wasn't like an exit sign. It was kind of like, it just said, you are now entering your mission field. So you would see that after you came together and you gathered for worship service. And it was kind of jolting. It was a little bit striking that you're not exiting church service, but you're now entering what it's all about, right? And I think we need this. I think we need to remember this often. You hear it here all the time. Church does not exist so that we can come together and shake hands and have conversations with other believers, so that we can hide from the baddies out in the world, right? We're the goodies, so that we can have our little spot where we're safe. We don't do it so that we can come together and just sing songs or do prayer time together, or even this, so that you can hear somebody preach the word of God. Because all those things that we're doing will be done better when we get home, right? The one thing that we cannot do when we get home any longer is take the good news of Jesus Christ to somebody who desperately needs it. And this is why the church exists. And this is why a sign like that, as we leave this place, matters. That we're reminded that we are now going to do what we're on earth to do. Right? We call this section of Scripture the Great Commission. The small portion of it that we're in today, therefore go and make disciples, is known as the Great Command of the Great Commission, often. And what they are is this is the marching orders for the church. This is the marching orders for the church. And the truth is that we need to hear about this over and over again, our marching orders, because we all one day will have to reckon with how we looked at and interpreted and responded to this great command in this great commission to go. All of us. And the reason I say this is because a lot of us oftentimes look at this great commission as the great suggestion or the great option. You know what I mean? Like, oh, if I get around to it today, or God brings me someone and it just works out and they're in front of me, maybe I'll get to share Jesus. It's kind of optional, or like the great recommendation. But the truth is that when Jesus says this, it's none of those things. This is an actual command. It's the marching orders of the church. I think for most churches, we can carry it out, the Great Commission, in our minds like this. Use the word blessed in a conversation with somebody and think, there, I did it. Right? The Great Commission. I just shared Jesus with them. No, you didn't. You said that you used the word blessed. Right? Or we'll do it with the word God, which is a humongous word. It's a humongous word. Oh, we used the word God. We did it. They know everything about Jesus now. They know everything about the gospel now. Right? I've done this, or I played it off that way, these little, substitutes for walking in the Great Commission. I think we can even think like we can invite somebody to church, which is actually really good. Because hopefully you go to a church that's gospel-centered, so every time that you gather, the gospel's preached. So that's good, but we can invite someone to church and think, that's the Great Commission, and it's not. But what is it that Jesus is really commanding us to go and do here when we look at this? And I think we know. Pastors are no different with playing with this, guys. A lot of times, for many of us pastors these days, the Great Commission looks like going into a town or going into a city that we like. We come up with a cool name, come up with a cool logo, right? Branding. We set up shop somewhere. We watch people from other churches come to our church. We watch it grow. We build something bigger. And then we say to ourselves, look, I'm doing it. I've done it, right? The Great Commission. Look what I've accomplished. Look at what I've built. Look at my church go. The Great Commission. And it's not. It's called musical chairs, right? That's called my church is better than yours, And we as pastors do this all the time. And the point being is that we know what it is that Jesus is commanding. We really do, but we don't want to be the ones to have to do it. I mean, after all, isn't that what evangelists are for? You know what I mean? Isn't that why God instituted the office of evangelists in the church? Those are the guys that can go out and get messy and get dirty and get in front of people that we don't want to get in front of and have things hurled at them, maybe both physically and verbally. That's what evangelists are for. They're really good at that. They're kind of weird anyway. You know what I mean? So they can handle stuff like that. It's just not my thing. You know what I mean? I think there's so many ways that we can pass this off. And we know why. We know why we do, right? Because it's hard. It looks hard. It looks scary, sacrificial even. It might be costly even if we go out and share Jesus with people. It might be painful even if we go out and share Jesus with people. On the other side of the sphere, to go and tell, practically everybody in the church at some point is looking for and searching for and desiring the answer to this one question: what is my calling? What is my purpose? Why do I exist? What's God calling me specifically to do? What am I really still here on earth for? And the answer is for this. For this. To take people to Jesus. And for me, it helps to think of it this way. I'm here today, and I'm saved, I'm forgiven, I'm redeemed, I'm glory bound, because back when Jesus gave this command that day, someone did it. And then someone did it. And then someone did it. On and on and on, all the way down through the corridors of history to little old me and little old you. In other words, I'm here today because someone took Jesus seriously when he told them to take him to others that day. Go do this. I'm here because someone was willing to take a risk and be mocked and chastised and abandoned and maybe even beaten, maybe even stoned or thrown to lions or burned at a stake or disowned by their family because they were obedient to the Great Commission, because they wouldn't shut up about Jesus. Like all that, all these scenarios, all these outcomes, these horrible ones that we all fear, are somewhere in my genealogy of salvation and in yours because they took this seriously, right? Because they were obedient to their God-given purpose on earth. So let's go ahead and let's just look at these 8 words this morning. We're going to start with therefore. If you have an ESV, it's probably flipped the other direction. It's probably go therefore, but therefore just needs to be first. You know what I mean? So we're gonna just briefly recalibrate on the therefore, because whenever we see a therefore in the text, we must find out what the therefore is there for, right? You know what I'm saying? That's what we got to do with it, because the therefore is going to give us the reason for why we can go and do that which is now being addressed. And the therefore is that which Chad preached on last week. If you didn't hear that, go back and find it. It's the first line in the Great Commission. It's that all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to Jesus. This is the reason we're able to and can and should now go. So the reason we can go and make disciples of all nations, no matter the threat, no matter the risk, no matter the obstacle, no matter the price, is because Jesus is over, under, behind, and before all of it in power, glory, and outcome. Okay? In other words, we can do it because we're not doing it. He is. Or, if it's more helpful, we're not doing it alone, okay? We can do it because we're not doing it alone. That's why this matters. All authority, Jesus says, in heaven and on earth has been given to me. So he's already in power and already positioned. It's something that's already happened when he gave this command to his disciples, just fresh off the press of the resurrection. Hasn't even ascended yet. And he's already making sure they know, no, I'm already in position and power. You can go. Like that's all settled already. And we need to know this. And this changes everything, because if he doesn't have all authority over all of it, in what might come to pass in our evangelistic efforts, then the entire task is beyond terrifying. Beyond terrifying, and most important, futile. It's futile, like doomed to failure if you and I are alone, if it's just you, I, our words, our cleverness, our skills in communication, our ability to answer all the questions. Like if everything's just relying on that and there is nothing over the top, there's no power over that, through that, in that, like it's doomed to fail, right? We all know what Paul says in the early chapters of 1 Corinthians, like the mode of preaching, which is how God's ordained to call his elect, right? Is through the foolish, that it is foolishness. Like it's absolutely silly to people that something like that would happen with something like this. So if he doesn't have all authority over all things, who would ever in their right minds go and do it? I wouldn't. You know? Why would we? Why should we? Interacting with people like that, right? Me against them. My claims against their claims. My intellect against their intellect. Alone against their hostility and their anger and their annoyance and their hate and their confrontation. Confrontation. I don't know why I had a hard time with that. There it is. Confrontation. How many of you like confrontation? Right? The problem is some of you do. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But yeah, like confrontation stinks. I'm not down with right? Will they be smarter than me? Oftentimes, yes, they will. Will they have questions or concerns or challenges that I don't have answers for? Oftentimes, yes. Yes, they will. Right? Might they even come against my life or mean me harm or threaten me physically? Oftentimes, it's coming. It hasn't been there for us. We've been pretty sheltered, but it's coming. But for most other nations throughout church history, yes. Yes, they will. That's part of picking up our cross, right? And following Christ. So then why in the world, if this is true, like would I want to do such a thing? How can I possibly do such a thing? Answer, because all authority in heaven, on earth, is his. It's his. Because all authority is his. Like today, like right now, it belongs to him. We can do it because he is with us, doing that, performing that which comes to pass. We can do it because he's Lord even over their potential hostility and anger and opposition and challenges and intellect and knowledge and doubts and hate. He's even Lord over that. In other words, it cannot fail, even if it feels like or looks like failure, because he will always have the final say in our evangelistic efforts. And he knows what he's doing, like I'm pretty sure, right? After all, what's the worst thing they can do to us? Kill us? Which only puts us where? You know what I'm saying? So, because all authority is his, I need not fear man, but trust God. Obey God. Listen, if Jesus isn't telling the truth about being over all things, this is a ridiculously frightening task. But if he is, who can be against us? Therefore, the therefore is therefore our comfort, conviction, confidence, which allows us to be mobilized to go, which brings us to the great command of the Great Commission, go. The word go is an action. It's a verb. I don't like it, but it is a verb. I checked again, right? Go has intention, it has purpose, it has movement. There's motion there, right? Synonyms for go are words like advance, travel, run, or even walk. The antonym for go is stay, right? Sit, wait, which I'm much better at. I really am. Like, I wish that Jesus would have said, like, stay, and I will bring all the nations to you, and they will be saved. I would have been pretty good at that. I would have been a good evangelist for that. You know what I mean? Just stay, right? But no, Jesus here, he calls them forward. He calls us forward to go. He commands us forward. He commands us out. And we need to be commanded out. Because the church we're oftentimes really good at staying. We're really good at building a little building like this called the church building and then coming in once a week or maybe twice a week, maybe for something else and doing our little thing and just hope that somebody stops by, some heathen, like just comes in and visits and goes like, what must I do to be saved? Like, you know, like I feel like a lot of times that's how we function, right? But Jesus here is calling us out. He's calling us out like a squad leader commanding his troops to press further across the battlefield, to advance. And we need it, don't we? We need it. I'm not talking to you women because I know you don't care about movies like this. Dudes, like Saving Private Ryan comes to mind, like obviously the opening sequence, right? Or even, a couple of the battles, Crossroads, whatever, Band of Brothers, where there was a field, there was a plot of land where a straight like kamikaze charge just needed to happen, right? Like a suicide mission. And they had to go and they had to take that field. They had to take that piece of land. And the soldier knows, like, there's danger if I keep going that way, right? Like they're there, they're dug in, bullets are flying past my head, explosions are going off, mortars are going off, like just chaos. People are dying. Like there's danger if I keep going that way. So we question, we have second thoughts. Sometimes soldiers had second thoughts and they dropped because of everything that was going on against them in the direction they were told to go. The tendency is to stop. It's to back off. It's even to retreat. But if they do, they lose the field, right? The enemy advances. The enemy pushes forward as we back off. And this is where the analogy maybe breaks down a little bit, because the gates of hell will not prevail against Christ's church. So I don't want to take it there. You know what I mean? Like Jesus has already bought the field. It's his. Like he's already won. But the weird thing is that for whatever reason, he has chosen, he has ordained for you and I to be the means in which he saves the world, the people in that field. Right? So how are we doing? Right? But the tendency, because it's so scary, because it's so dangerous, and again, it hasn't been for us, may be coming, but for most of Christianity, it has been. Dangerous business to carry Jesus to the nations, right? And the tendency can be to fall back. It can be to stop. It can be to drop. it can be to stay. And so the commander gives the cry, right? Over and over again, that his cry to go, to advance, might be bolder and louder and more relentless than all the other noises going off around the soldier. He needs to hear over and over again, that soldier during that attack, go, move forward, move ahead, advance. And he commands us forward due to priority. That field must be taken. That's the priority. The priority is not that all lives are saved in this advance. It's that that field must be taken, right? The priority is to get across the field. And shouldn't the gospel, the good news, more than anything else that exists, have priority in our lives? In every interaction we have, is there anything better that we can tell anybody or offer anybody or give to anybody than the good news, if we really believe it's the greatest news we've ever heard? Jesus thinks so. Most days I think so. Some days maybe I don't. Every day I should. I was reminded of this a couple of weeks ago. I was doing a project at home and working with cedar boards, and I ran out of cedar boards. And so my wife got on Marketplace to find someone with cedar boards. She found someone who was selling the boards that I needed. She called him up, lived in Bend. I stereotype people still, okay? You can call it judging, you can call it whatever you want. I feel like we all do it, but it was in a retirement community. And it was an old couple. Just a good-looking, they were just a good-looking couple of boomers. Can I say boomers? All right, couple boomers. And I do stereotype boomers as far as what they eat and what time they go to bed and how they vote and all that stuff. And homie had an American flag hat on, and I just thought, oh, these are just good old-fashioned couple right here. You know what I mean? And so I get the boards and I load the boards up. And then we're standing around talking, and his wife has taken my wife off to show her every plant and flower that she's planted in the yard, because that's what chicks do, right? And me and him are standing there talking about war. No, I'm just kidding. We weren't talking about war. We were having a different conversation. But there was finally a point where this guy looks at me and he goes, so what do you do? And this is always, I know it's coming every time I get into a conversation with somebody, but I'm thinking, because he's a good old-fashioned boomer, this is going to go over great, you know? I'm like, oh, I pastor a church, you know. And he steps back like this, right? And his wife, who's over here like in full like conversation with my wife, stops and looks at me and glares at me. And I'm like, well, what's going on? Like, you guys are supposed to be on my side. You know what I mean? Like, what is this? And she finally, she was, just their countenance changed. Everything about both of them changed. And she just said, she comes over and she just goes, well, I don't feel good. I'm going to the house. Like, just a minute ago, she was just full, like, she couldn't be more excited to show my wife all of her plants and flowers. And she was just full. Now it's like, I'm out. See ya. And this guy proceeded to tell me all the reasons why the church is horrible and fake. And like this dude had years of trauma with the church. And it was like, tag, you're it. Like, you're the guy that it's going to fall on today. And he had some serious issues. And his greatest issue is that he doesn't understand what the gospel is and why the church exists and why the gospel matters for each of us. Typical. And the truth is, you and I have earned a lot of that. We're not real good a lot of times at showing people why we need Jesus and maybe more importantly, why they need Jesus. It's just all about, oh, don't do this and do that. And sure enough, the guy had been divorced and remarried, and the church gave him grief for that. Their current best friends are two lesbian ladies that are married, and the church gives them grief for it. Like this dude just had problem after problem after problem, and I just said, look, I've been married to my wife for 31 years by the grace of God, and I don't, I deal with sexual impurity in my heart and in my mind, but I've never dealt with that kind. But let me tell you why Jesus matters, because he didn't get it. And we stood there for probably a half hour and got to tell this, basically share the gospel with this guy and then pray with him. And what it told me once more, reminded me of once more, right, is that in all interactions, the priority is not cedar boards. The priority is not groceries at the grocery store. The priority is not floating the river or going to a concert or even going to work. The priority in each and every one of those things is gospel to somebody who needs it. This is why the Christian exists. And it was just a bonus that I went home with cedar boards, right? Got them both. Go means that the gospel ought always be first in everything. In everything. Everything else secondary. Cedar board secondary, right? In fact, the actual wording in the Greek for go, it just says go here, is actually as you go. That's actually how it's worded in the Greek. What does this mean? It means that as you do what you do, whatever you find yourself in your day-to-day endeavors and duties doing, you're going gospel first. Gospel first. Family, friendships, job, like I said, shopping, recreating. This is the goal. This is the constant. This is the priority. Gospel. And of course, what is it that we're going to do? Next two words, make disciples. That's what we're going to do. We're going to make disciples. Well, what's a disciple? Disciple's a follower. In this case, obviously, of Jesus. The follower of Jesus. So Jesus is saying, like, go and make followers of me. Or call people to follow me. Call people to me. In other words, we're taking people to a person, not a behavior, first. I need to hear this, and so do you. We're taking people to a person as we go and make disciples, not a behavior first. We're taking people to someone who is alive and active and personal and able to change to the utmost. Once that relational connection's made, Jesus deals with the behavior. Jesus deals with behavior, right? With what follows. Why? Because he goes to the heart. So we just need to get them to Jesus. Like then Jesus sends in the cleanup crew, right? Holy Spirit. And he starts going to work doing what he does best. You know what I mean? Thus, to make disciples is not to teach people to be moral first. Oh, I wish I had this pounded into my brain when I started parenting. To make disciples is not to teach people to behave properly first. It is not to clean them up. It is not to have them follow rules. It is not to have them vote a certain way. It is not to have them have good church attendance. The goal is not to help someone be a good person. It's to introduce them to the good person, Christ, right? So don't be a jerk for Jesus. Don't be one of those Christians that just walks around in your self-righteousness saying, I don't act this way anymore, why are you doing it? To make disciples in this immediate context, in this verse, is to invite them to come and meet Jesus, to come and follow Jesus. You remember Jesus when he called his disciples? When he first called them, they didn't know what was going on. They're fishing, they're sitting under a tree, they're doing whatever they're doing. And Jesus seeks them out, right? They didn't put themselves on any backstop to be picked for a team. He picked them. And he goes to each of them, and what does he say? Come and follow me. He doesn't say to any of them, like, you need to stop doing this, and then, like, we'll talk about you following me. You know what I mean? You need to take a shower. You need to change your clothes. You need to comb your hair. You need to stop cussing. You know what I mean? Like, there's none of that. Jesus walks up to each of these guys who are completely clueless with no presupposition of what it looks like to follow God. And he just says, follow me. Come with me. Know me. Be with me. Right? If you're going to follow Jesus, what do you need? Jesus. You need Jesus if you're going to follow Jesus, right? And of course, like discipling, as we get farther down into this text, it's coming, will then include, right? It will then move into teaching them to obey all things that he's taught, so that will come, but we need to be careful that we don't get the cart before the horse, right? People that don't have Jesus need Jesus. That's what they need. And so that's how we make disciples. That's the starting point, is we bring people before Jesus, okay? The first step in making a disciple is for that person to know, see, meet, have an encounter with the risen Jesus. You remember the words of the angel with the women at the resurrection, right? Even Jesus with the disciples, when he first appeared to them after the resurrection, come see, go tell, right? Come and see comes first. People need to come and see him. They need to see his goodness. They need to see his righteousness. They need to see him for them. They need to see him on a cross. They need to come and see an empty grave, an empty tomb. They need to come and see a risen Jesus. Then they can go and tell, right? Then they can walk in that. So it starts with come and see. And who is this for? Who are the candidates that we're going to make disciples of? All nations. Last two words, all nations, right? Guess who this includes? All people everywhere. Guess who it excludes? Nobody, right? For more like nobody. And I think you and I, we probably have that little group of people in our minds that we know personally. It's like, nope. Yeah. Yep. In other words, God is not racist. He's not preferential to appearance or current circumstance or rap sheet or history of wrongs or background or privilege or accomplishments or genealogy or geographical location. And if he's not partial to any of those things, neither should we. He's gunning for all kinds of types of flavors of people everywhere to come and see. He's gunning for whosoever will, no matter where or how they're found. In other words, if they're human, they're a candidate, right? Again, this is good news. This is really good news for everybody. Now, this obviously doesn't mean that all people that we go to will be saved, but our job is to call all people everywhere to follow Jesus. Jesus' job is to give them the power to do so. And he can, and he will. All right? Now, someone may ask, does this mean I need to cross an ocean to a foreign people in order to fulfill this? Answer is no. And I thank God for that, because I would never be able to eat the food over there. I wouldn't. I told, like, people are always trying to get me to, like, hey, I'm going over here this year. You could come with me. You know what I mean? It's like, I ain't going. Like, God caused me to be born in the United States, and I know why. It's because the food. I can do the food. I can't. My wife hates cooking for me. Like I'm so picky. I'm like a child, man. You know what I mean? It's like, give me a dino nugget and I'll be happy. Like, you know what I mean? And so, like, no, I'm not just for that reason alone, I'm not going, but praise God, I don't have to. Like, that's not like the requirement for being a part of, being active in the Great Commission, is that I have to, cross an ocean, right? Where was I? Oh yeah, dino nuggets, yeah. I don't know what I'm doing. All right. Making disciples of all nations, believe it or not, begins or starts right where you're at. Right where I'm at. Consider these guys' context as Jesus gave this to them. Right? They're in one local regional place, Jerusalem, no cars, no trains, no airplanes, like nothing. They didn't seem to pack a lunch immediately and start walking, right? Like, no, Jesus gave them the game plan for the church, for the gospel, for him to be made known, to make disciples of all nations, and then they started with the people around them, So it happened not because they physically went to faraway places, but because they preached the gospel as they went. Like we already talked about, as they went, right? You remember Pentecost, of course? And of course, this is God, again, this is just a great example of how God is building his church, and the gates of hell will not prevail. But Pentecost, we have them spirit empowered in that upper room. And so they go outside. And of course, Jerusalem at that point was an epicenter of all kinds of cultures. It was a crossroads for all kinds of nations and cultures. And so there's all kinds of people from nations there. And they go outside and Peter's, he's just empowered to preach Jesus to the crowds. There was a couple thousand people there. So the gospel goes out, many people get saved, and then guess what happens? They all go back to their homes in their nations. And guess what they take with them? Right? A souvenir. They take something very special for their people and their ethnicity. It's called the gospel, right? God like works that way. The gospel works that way. In other words, this is something that occurs naturally. This is something that occurs organically by each of us walking actively in this thing right where we are in the place that we are in. Now, yes, there are people God has called. We've got Glenn Miller, we've had the Browns over in Thailand. Like, there are people that are kind of wired and they can't be caged, okay? And that's a calling from God on them that they have to go do this. They're designed, they're driven to go far. But that's not necessarily the big idea of what Jesus means here. Don't let anybody tell you it is. I've been guilted over it before. It's more of a statement of being ready and intentional with the gospel every day, rather than a responsibility to travel great distances in order to give it, right? Listen, the gospel takes care of its reach as it's shared and received. The gospel will, by nature, find its way out. It will, by nature, go far and wide. A couple of weeks ago, we had our Spurgeon Legacy. By the way, thank you so much, all of you that just helped with that, prayed for us with that. It was a conference for a bunch of pastors that came together, and we had a guy named Todd Miles come and preach. And here at the very end of my sermon, which we are at, I promise you, there are a few quotes that I heard from him that day that just made so much sense as I had my head in this, right? One of them was this. Todd said, "There's nothing niche or trifle about Christianity and the gospel. It's meant to travel. It is meant to travel. It will travel, right? It cannot be restricted. It cannot be restrained. It cannot be confined to a geographical location. The primary idea with making disciples of the nations is that the gospel is for anybody. And as the gospel goes to anybody, it will find its way to everybody. Everybody. That's how it works. Now, to help us maybe a little more fully comprehend the heart of God for us in having missional priority, Great Commission priority, consider this for a second. In the beginning of history, there were 4 words that God spoke to Adam and Eve after He created them. He brought them together. He declared them together to be very good. Do you know what those 4 words were? Be fruitful and multiply. Be fruitful and multiply. Fill the earth. Fill the earth, right? And He didn't just say it. He commanded them. He commanded it. And now here, in Matthew 28, at the end of the age, out of the mouth of God, the second Adam, the church hears the same thing. Be fruitful and multiply. This is what we're hearing. You know what this means? It means that this is the plan. This is the heart of God for you and for me and His church and the nations. Is the gospel of Christ going to all of it. That's His plan. This is why the world continues to spin and we continue to breathe and it hasn't gone through fire yet. It's because God has more people that need to hear, come and see the Son. Okay? This is why we're still here. This is why the church exists. This is your calling. This is my calling. This is your mission. This is my mission, to go to them with the gospel. After all, He modeled it first, right? We read this in the invocation when we opened the service this morning, John chapter 1, right? In the beginning was the Word, and the Word became flesh, right? Get down to verse 14. And the Word tabernacled, dwelt, came to you and I. He went. Could have stayed, but He didn't, right? And I hope you know this. I have to think about this a lot. There's going to be a lot of time for us to rest when we get home, guys. You know what I'm saying? There's going to be a lot of time when we get home for us to kick our feet up and enjoy all of the glorious things that it is that God was doing through us and with us and with the world, right? But now, today, in the small window before the master of the house returns, there is going to be done for his name's sake. And I know, once more, that hearing this is annoying for some of you because you hear it all the time at the door, and it's one of those hard things that we harp on and we push and we exhaust it over and over again, but we're not sorry. We will continue to harp on this as long as we're here, because this repetition, this annoying loop of hearing that which makes up the Christian life and what it's really about is the will of God for his people, right? It is his plan, it is his purpose, it is his calling to us who belong to him. And so even if it sounds like a bad idea, or it sounds like hard work, or it sounds unappealing, right? The truth is that when we walk in that which God has designed us for, that's where joy is. That's where we actually have contentment and joy, even if it seems hard, right? And going through the wilderness of our lives with the priority of making disciples pleases our dad. And so as we do it, we have joy. And we have contentment. I kind of related with this. Todd Miles also, he quoted, anyone know who Tom Landry is? You boomers do. What was he, 80s? Late 70s, 80s? Coach of the Dallas Cowboys, right? The dude that always wore the fedora. Like, apparently this dude actually put out Bible tracts and stuff. This dude was like a huge Christian. In fact, Mike McCarter, down in La Pine, or a La Pine location, got saved by this dude, by him ordering one, watching a football game and then seeing it advertised in a commercial and then ordering one and just read it and got saved. Yeah, it's kind of wild, right? But Tom was asked one day, he was known as one of the greatest coaches, right? And he was asked one day in an interview, what's it like to coach? And his answer was this. When asked about what it was like to coach, and the reason I'm saying is because it kind of translates into why we're not sorry and we're going to keep annoying you. He said, the job of a coach is to tell a bunch of people to do a bunch of things they don't want to do so that one day they may become all that they hope to be. And if you're a Christian, I would assume that all that you hope to be is like Jesus. And Brent feels the same way. And Chad feels the same way. That's why we say the same things over and over again that we say to you. There's nothing greater we can give you. And I think we need to remember too, I think Todd Miles actually brought this up too. At the end of the day, if you kind of survey the New Testament scriptures, there's only 2 days that matter, right? This one and that one. Seriously. Today and the one where Christ returns. And if we really believe, if we really have our eyes set on that one, it will change this one, right? And so we keep the appearing of our Lord, that glorious day where all things are consummated and made right and glorified, in mind as a weapon to mobilize us to do what needs to be done today. Thank you, Lord, once more for shooting straight with us. We could probably go in and play games with the interpretation of this, but we all know in our heart of hearts we can't. It just says what it says. We know what you're telling us to do. And so we ask that we would be more immersed in you as the days go on, with your word, in fellowship, in prayer, in just receiving truth from you, so that we would be solidified in our obedience. God, I pray that you would give us a fire for lost people. I pray that our hearts would break for lost people. I pray that you would break them. That we would look at them the way you look at them. That we would see them the way you see them. That we would feel about them the way you feel about them. And then take you to them. So purify us, calibrate us again. In your name, and for your sake. Amen.